In this class we want to talk about the determinants of stakeholder power. For stakeholders to have power and influence, they need to exert leverage on the company. In other words, the stakeholders must have some power over the company, some influence on the company. And the power can be exerted in various ways. So a stakeholder could influence the company in a number of ways. For example, it could disrupt the organization's plans. A stakeholder, for example, who was working with the company for the delivery of a certain project, and perhaps it was going to supply the machinery, that stakeholder could seriously disrupt the organization's plans. A stakeholder could cause uncertainty in plans. For example, the workers may, through the trade union, may threaten strike action over certain issues, or may exert force on the company to change certain policies. It could also be the case, of course, that the organisation needs and relies on the stakeholders in a very strong sense. This means if the stakeholders have particular roles, for example specialist work, then the organisation would find it difficult if the workers were to leave. So an organisation needs and relies on the stakeholders. Generally speaking, it needs and relies on all the stakeholders, from the workers, the directors, the shareholders, the suppliers, the banks. Organisations need the stakeholders, so they must make sure that the stakeholders are, in a sense, happy with the direction in which the company is moving. Now, the internal stakeholders can influence the company in various ways. We say here that the internal stakeholders have leverage over the company in certain ways. For example, managers have their own sets of priorities. Managers are interested in salaries and good working conditions, holidays, perks in the job. So managers will seek to influence the company's directions. And managers make decisions, and therefore they do have extensive power. The internal stakeholders, well, they have a power to impede the implementation of strategy. Stakeholders can drag their feet, if they can slow things down. The workers could slow things down. The managers, the suppliers, the banks, all sorts of people can influence the organisation and influence its strategy. But the internal stakeholders, for example the workers, could certainly slow down the progress towards the implementation of a certain strategy. The workers could threaten industrial action, for example, if they're not happy about a certain policy or the direction in which the company is moving. A manager could threaten to resign, and perhaps the manager is a powerful manager, is someone who has expert knowledge of the business and has much experience in the area. Then that manager perhaps could again influence the business, influence the direction of the business through the power of simply saying that he or she wants to resign. Workers could refuse to be relocated if the business was thinking of moving to a certain area. The workers would say, well, we're not moving, we like the area here, our families are settled here, we have children at school, we have our parents living in this area, so we're not moving. And again, there is an influence on the business. Some shareholders are connected to the business. They're not internal, connected. For example, shareholders. And the shareholders have voting rights. And if the shareholders are upset with the business and were to sell their shares, then the value of the business would fall on the stock market, and perhaps the business would be taken over. So shareholders are important. They're an important stakeholder in businesses. Creditors could refuse credit. The banks could charge high rates of interest, or put pressure on the business to repay previous loans. And in fact, the creditors could liquidate the business if they were not happy about getting their money back on time. So again, it's a connected stakeholder that has a lot of influence on the business. The suppliers for raw materials and the suppliers for specialist machinery, or just generally the suppliers to the business, could refuse credit, in which case the business will have to find the cash, find the capital up front to pay for its supplies, and that means it may have a cash flow problem. Customers who are also connected, customers could threaten to go elsewhere if they don't like the product or the quality of the product or the image of the product. So the customers are connected stakeholders in a business. The government and pressure groups are also related to businesses and are stakeholders. The government can influence a business through taxation, through its fiscal policy, taxation, and through its spending. Perhaps it's spending in a local area, perhaps it's improving the area. It's a stakeholder. It's a stakeholder in all the businesses. The government could take legal action against the business if it believes the business is operating badly, perhaps dangerously to the community, or it's polluting the atmosphere, or it's causing distress within the community. And of course the government keeps an eye on business to make sure that they're behaving ethically and also being competitive, not fixing prices in the local area. The community and pleasure groups, they can influence a business through publicising the business's activities, particularly the business's activities that they regard as unacceptable. Businesses don't like bad publicity, so if a local pressure group says something that the business is doing something bad, it doesn't read very well in the press, and the reputation of the business will be affected. Perhaps customers will be affected. There is also political pressure for changes in the law, and if the law changes, the law affects the business. So pressure groups in society who want certain laws implemented relating to business, in a sense indirectly influence the business, at least during the period in which they're pressing for the law to be changed. The customers, as I said earlier, could refuse to buy the goods and services, and pressure groups can form customers into groups who don't buy from certain companies for various reasons, political reasons or social reasons or whatever it is. And in the end, I suppose the pressure group could take illegal action such as sabotage. It is illegal, but the threat of direct action against a company must be always in the minds, particularly of companies who are vulnerable in this way, or who are engaged in activities which are controversial. So there are various pressure groups that need to be taken into account by companies when operating their business. So in this class we've seen a number of stakeholders. We've seen how the stakeholders can influence it, the internal ones, the connected ones, and the government and the pressure groups. So now we've got a background on how stakeholders come into existence and the power of the stakeholders. Okay, thank you for watching.